Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. I am pleased to present our research entitled Motivational Factors in Learning English as a Second Language among Politeknik Merlimau Melaka PMM students. This study was conducted by my colleague Puan Nur Fazila, who is the main author of this paper, and myself, Roshila binti Muhammad Tanggavelu, as the co-researcher. As language educators at Politeknik Merlimau Melaka, we often observe varying levels of motivation among our students when it comes to learning English. This prompted us to examine the underlying motivational factors, right? The intrinsic versus the extrinsic motivation that influence their engagement, performance, and attitude towards English as second language. In this presentation, I will walk you through the overview of the study, the research objective, the literature review to help us grasp the importance of motivation in language learning from different perspectives, as well as the methodology, the key findings, the conclusion, as well as the limitations of our study. We sincerely hope that the insights gained from this study can contribute to more effective strategies in ESL teaching and support a more student centered approach in our classroom. I would like to share the scenario of English as second language here in Malaysia. In the Malaysian education system, English is being taught as the second language starting from the early years of primary school, and this continues for at least 11 years up until the students complete their secondary level. While at the tertiary level, English courses are now part of the core curriculum and are made compulsory for graduation. Now, despite this prolonged exposure, many students still struggle to achieve sufficient competency in using the language. It is not uncommon to find learners at the tertiary level who are unable to communicate effectively or confidently in English, even after over a decade of formal instruction, which also reflects the bitter reality in Malaysian polytechnics. One of the key reasons for this may lie in the learner's motivation. According to Baker in 1988, if a student does not perceive the need to use a second language either within or outside of their community, they are more likely to develop a negative attitude towards learning it. According to Donye in 1998, motivation is a critical factor in second language acquisition, influencing both the effort and persistence shown by the learners. This is supported by Gardner's theory of motivation, which highlights the learner's eagerness and the satisfaction gained through learning as essential components of successful language acquisition. In essence, motivation is one of the most influential factors in determining the student's performance in English. Therefore, this study aims to explore the motivational factors that influence the students at Politeknik Merlimau Melaka in their effort to learn English as second language. By identifying what drives or hinders their motivation, we hope to gain valuable insight that can inform more effective and engaging teaching strategies, particularly within the context of technical and vocational education. Moving on to the objective of our study. The objective of our study is to determine students' perception of the motivational factors involved in learning English as second language or ESL. In understanding motivation, we refer to the framework by Daisy and Ryan in the year 2000, which distinguishes between the two key types of motivation, namely extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic motivation is driven by external factors. This includes things like grades, performance evaluations, awards, or even the approval and recognition from others. Essentially, students are motivated to learn because of what they might receive in return. On the other hand, intrinsic motivation comes from within. It is linked to personal values, interest, or a genuine sense of satisfaction and curiosity. Students who are intrinsically motivated tend to engage in learning because they find it meaningful and or enjoyable. This type of motivation is often associated with deeper meaning, better retention and creativity. By examining these two types of motivation, we aim to better understand what drives our student at Politeknik Merlimau Melaka to learn English, whether it is for external reward or personal growth. In this literature review section, we are going to look at how motivation has been defined and its relevance to second language learning. Motivation in general is seen as the combination of effort, desire, and positive attitudes towards learning a language. Gardner in 1985 also highlights that while effort is important, it doesn't always mean a person is truly motivated. In our context, English is a compulsory subject in polytechnics and a requirement to graduate. However, many of our students still struggle and lecturers often find it challenging to keep them motivated. So, in short, motivation is widely acknowledged as one of the most influential factors in learning, guiding, and sustaining behavior throughout the learning process, as stated by both Pintrich and Shunk in 2002 and by Barron in 1996. Several scholars have highlighted how motivation affects language learning. As you can see from the slide, Lucas in 2010 stated that learners are naturally motivated to improve speaking and reading, especially when tied to knowledge and achievement. Meanwhile, Guthrie in 1997 emphasized that intrinsic motivation helps not just with reading comprehension, but also with reading more widely. And lastly, Mulek and Obadlik in 2016 found that language learning is more effective when students' classroom preferences align with their motivation. Next, according to Huit in 2001, paying attention to the importance of language can boost learners' motivation, even if they don't have strong intrinsic motivation. According to Huit, motivated students also tend to have more positive attitudes towards learning English. Meanwhile, Por Hussein Gilagjani, Leong, and Saburi in the year 2012 stated that success in learning depends on how clearly, learners define their goals and how much they desire to achieve them. And they identify two types of motivation, namely the integrative motivation, where learners would want to learn a language out of genuine interest in its people and culture, and the instrumental motivation, where learners study the language to achieve practical goals such as career or academic success. Here, I would like to share some of the findings from earlier research that were fundamental to our study. First is a research by Lucas et al. In 2010, where they found that students were mainly motivated by intrinsic factors when it comes to key language skills like speaking, reading, and listening. They were driven to learn English to achieve goals and gain new knowledge through skill mastery. Motivation increased when students view these skills, especially speaking and reading, as relevant and useful for their academic and career success. The study also highlighted that extrinsic motivation, particularly the role of English as the medium of instruction, in other core subjects like science, humanities, and social sciences. Another notable study was conducted by Fatiha, Sliman, Mustafa, and Yahya in 2014, where they completed a study on attitudes and motivation in learning English as a foreign language. They concluded that both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation play a significant role in shaping how students engage with the language. The study also pointed out that external factors like teaching methods and the learning environment can greatly influence students' motivation and attitudes towards learning English. Now, let's move on to the next part of the presentation, the research methodology. where we will look at how the study was carried out. For this study, we conducted a quantitative survey using a Google form. A total of 114 students from Politeknik Merlimau Melaka who were taking communicative English courses in the 2024-2025 session took part in the survey. The questionnaire was adapted from Garner's Attitude Motivation Test Battery, where it had 20 Likert scale items divided into two parts, where the first part collected on the demographic information, while the second part focused on the students' intrinsic and extrinsic motivation in learning English as second language. And the main goal was to understand what motivates the students to learn English and what factors influence their motivation. And here is the findings for the demographic section. In terms of gender, the respondents were fairly balanced with 48.2% of male and 51.8% of female students. And most of the students, they came from the hospitality department, JPH, followed by the electrical engineering department, JKE, followed by the commerce department, JP, Civil Engineering Department JKA, and a small number from the Mechanical Engineering Department JKM. As for the semesters, the majority were from semester 1, followed by semester 5, while the rest were from semester 3 and 4 with no participants from semester 2. Let's take a look at the key findings for intrinsic motivation based on the table shown here. There were 10 items under the intrinsic motivation, where most of the items recorded high mean scores between 3.6 to 4.1. Only one item had a medium score of 3.4. What does it mean? To quickly summarize from the table, overall, the students showed strong motivation to learn English, especially when it comes to self development, talking to people from different backgrounds, and improving their skills as these areas scored the highest. A little lower, but still fairly strong, were things like enjoying English, feeling comfortable speaking it, and wanting to learn it on a personal level. However, the lowest motivation was around making full use of time to learn English. This ties to our key insight. While motivation is high overall, areas like time management and sticking to consistent practice are where students seem to struggle the most. So that's something we may want to focus on improving going forward. Now, let's take a look at the extrinsic motivation part. We looked at 10 different items here, and the overall trend shows generally high mean scores, suggesting that external factors play a strong role in students' motivation to learn English. So, as we delve into the results, we can see that most of the students are primarily instrumentally motivated. The top motivations like doing well in exam, preparing for a future career, getting a good job all had high mean scores of 4.0 and above. Even becoming more knowledgeable scored right at 4.0. In contrast, motivation based on personal pride or external validation were noticeably lower. Studying English to please family had a mean of 3.5, and the belief that one isn't truly educated unless fluent in English came in even lower at 3.2. So the data clearly shows a stronger focus on practical, goal oriented reasons rather than emotional or social ones. As you can see here, the findings for both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation factor is summarized in this table. In short, students were motivated to learn English, but what drives them differs. For intrinsic motivation, the students were mainly motivated by personal growth, interest, enjoyment, focusing on personal fulfillment, and managing their time well. Meanwhile, for extrinsic motivation, external rewards like career success, social approval, and expectation are key, with a stronger focus on academic and career goals. In conclusion, Both intrinsic and extrinsic motivations are strong, but intrinsic motivation stands out as more consistent. Learners genuinely enjoy English for self growth, while external goals like academic or career success also plays a key role. Now, moving on to the final part of the presentation, which is the research limitation. Although this study provides meaningful insights, there are several constraints to be considered. Firstly, the small and limited sample. Especially with only one Malaysian polytechnic involved, namely Politeknik Merlimau Melaka, this may not reflect the wider student population. Future studies should involve more participants from other polytechnics, public and private universities for broader applicability. Secondly, the study relied only on questionnaires, which may not fully capture the depth of student motivation. Including other methods like classroom observation could actually offer richer data. Lastly, the short time frame may not reflect the changes in motivation over time. A longer study period could offer more accurate and dynamic insight. Despite these limitations, this study lay a strong foundation for future research in the area. Well, that brings me to the end of my presentation. In summary, this study highlights the importance of both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation in English language learning, while also acknowledging areas for future improvement in the research design. I hope the findings offer some useful perspectives for further exploration and practice. Thank you for your time and attention.